Thanks, y'all, for joining us at the Project Censored Show. We're very glad to be joined by Ann Wright, who served 29 years in the U.S. Army, Army Reserves, and retired as a colonel. She was a U.S. diplomat for 16 years and resigned from the U.S. government 21 years ago in opposition to Bush's war in Iraq. She has been on 5 flotillas to Gaza, and she is the co-author of Dissent, Voices of Conscience. Ann, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
It's a pleasure, Eleanor. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. So, as was put out on freedomflotilla.org in a press release, the International Freedom Flotilla Coalition will sail in mid-April with multiple vessels carrying 5,500 tons of humanitarian aid and hundreds of international human rights observers to challenge the ongoing illegal Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip, end quote. Now, and to ask the obvious question that folks might be wondering, aid has been blocked both by land and sea for months now. How do you intend to get around this blockade?
Well, we shall go to the exclusion zone that the Israeli military has set up that can extend out to 100 nautical miles. We've been there before, as you mentioned. I've been on several flotillas before. We've been stopped. We've been boarded. Tragically, people have been killed by the Israelis on these flotillas. In 2010, they executed point blank range 10 people that were on the Marvi Marmara and wounded 50 of them. So we certainly know what the danger is. And this particular flotilla going during a time that the Israelis are committing a genocide in Gaza, where they have killed hundreds of aid workers, and the 7 that were killed with the World Central Kitchen were just the last numbers of them, of course, being internationals and not Palestinians. It got a lot of press because our press is racist, our policies are racist, and what is being done to the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank is a racist genocide that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I understand you will have human rights observers on board. Do you have any kind of government backing or any kind of more official backing that might dissuade some of that direct violence that you were talking about?
Well, we do not have government approval of any of this. In fact, I am sure that within days, the United States government will issue a travel advisory and specifically do not get on a flotilla because of the danger. Yeah, the danger from America's strongest ally, Israel, is going to go kill again internationals that are just trying to say to the world this illegal blockade that Israel has had on on Gaza, this illegal naval blockade that's been going on for over decades, really. It needs to end, and my government supports it. They support every criminal illegal act that Israel has done, and so we expect the U.S. government to say you shouldn't go, and the U.S. naval vessels that are out there that have helped Israel in its naval blockade now with a UK ship that's coming in. We certainly do anticipate that we will have confrontations with governments that are doing nothing to stop the genocide. And as human rights observers, knowing full well the danger of this, we say, when the governments won't act, then citizens must take some action. And we're also frustrated with what is going on. I mean, frustrated is the mild word. We're horrified that 6 months the Israelis have been able to kill as many Palestinians as they want to. And, while the International Court of Justice has issued an opinion of plausible genocide, well, I think when they relook at now with other things that it is a genocide. It is a genocide in Gaza, and we just will not stand by any longer and take no action. I mean, people all over the world are taking action. It's not to minimize at all what we all have been doing for 6 months, but it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. And so this is one more step in trying to somehow generate enough international governmental action. And there are actions these governments can take. They don't have to just sit there with their thumbs up their butts doing nothing. They can sever diplomatic ties with Israel, for God's sakes. They can put an economic blockade on Gaza. I'm not on Gaza. I mean, it already is there. An economic blockade on Israel. There's a lot of stuff that governments could do if they just had the will to do it. But these politicians are, a bunch of chickens, and our government, for this genocide, is that's why we want a lot of U.S. citizens on this flotilla that say to our own government, you all ought, all of you in the Biden administration ought to be hauled before the International Criminal Court as war criminals, because you are enabling the genocide of Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ann, you mentioned U.S. citizens on the boat. Can you talk about a little bit of the blend of people? Is it predominantly U.S. citizens? Is it predominantly people that work as peace activists or are in that world? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Oh, we think we will have 35 countries or more that are going to be represented on this. It is an international flotilla, and we have people from the United States, from Canada, from all over Europe. We have them from Southeast Asia. Malaysia will have a very large contingent. We'll have doctors, nurses, we'll have activists, we'll have a wide range of people who are all just so perplexed about why the governments of the world are letting this go on. So it'll be a very, very important mission, and it's the country of Turkey will have a large number of people on, because that's where we are organizing it out of. And we are so proud of every single person that has made an application to go. Some of the applicants have had to withdraw their applications because, rightfully and expectedly, family pressures come to play. I mean, when people apply, they usually don't tell their families what they're doing, and then when they go back to the families to say, "Well, I'm going to be on this flotilla," well, let me just tell you, as you can imagine, there are husbands, wives, daughters, sons that are going, "Oh, come on, you just can't do this. You can't, because the potential for danger is so great." And so some of them have had to withdraw their applications, which we certainly understand. And there's no harm done. Nobody thinks less of them for having to do this, because it is a dangerous proposition. And we want to make sure that everyone that finally goes on these boats are well committed, knows fully the dangers, and are comfortable with taking the risks that this mission will require.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious too, you mentioned doctors and nurses. So is the hope that you will get to the shore and then also be able to not just deliver aid in the form of physical things, but also expertise?
Well, it's great to have all these doctors and nurses and medical people that will be on this boat, but the primary mission is not to deliver them to Gaza to continue long-term work there. They know the process for signing on to international medical teams that have been going in, but they wanted to be on this boat to do a short trip, to be there to actually assist us should there be violence that it results in injuries for people on the boats. If we get in there, of course they will go ashore, but they will not be staying for any length of time. It's more to observe what's going on, a picture of this moment, and then they can decide whether they want to go through the established routine to make sure that you're on a delegation that has the right equipment, has all the necessary things to actually really help someone or lots of people in Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are unaware of the dynamics by land and by sea, could you also talk about why a flotilla? Why come by the Mediterranean Sea as opposed to trying to come via land?
Well, a good question, but the answer is that that's been tried for 6 months, and the Israelis control the entry of all of the trucks, big trucks, hundreds of trucks that have been lined up in Egypt and in Jordan, and they're at the mercy of whether the Israeli criminal government, it's suicide, genocide, government will let one or two or three trucks in a day when they normally need 500 trucks loads of food and medical supplies to keep the population of 2.3 million people alive. So we see that the land convoys of trucks are at the mercy of the Israelis, and we decided that we would try it by sea and without the permission of the Israeli government. We are not asking for their permission. It should not be the permission of the genocidal criminal Israeli military that determines, how fast essentially the starvation goes in Gaza. So we are not asking permission to do this. We are, and we shouldn't have to, as citizens of the world, and as a place called Gaza that should have not been occupied for the past 40 years, and particularly a terrible occupation over the last 20 years. We are challenging the occupation and the Israeli government and all of those enablers, including the U.S. government, that have put such a horrific future for Gaza now.
Absolutely. And I'm curious if you know of any kind of legal precedent, whether that be with the UN World Court or anything like that, with regards to delivering aid during a genocide or during any kind of instance of war crimes. Do you have any kind of legal backing? Like if if the Israeli forces board your boat, what is the plan? Do you hand them some kind of information like this is what we're doing? We have, article so and so says that we're allowed to do this. Like what is the plan there?
Well, the International Court of Justice just issued an opinion last week that said every government, every person should do what they could to stop the genocide, to stop the starving of people. So there you have it. It's telling us as citizens of the world that we have the right to do what we can to try to stop this. Of course, it doesn't really matter what we do because the Israeli government does what it wants to with impunity. I mean, nobody ever holds the state of Israel accountable for all of its actions. So we're not relying really on any sort of legal mechanism that will suddenly open the doors to be able to go into Gaza. We anticipate that we will be stopped, but it's going to be interesting this time, whether it will be stopped by the Israeli commandos or whether they will enlist the aid of their great ally, the United States, that has ships there, and the British. Tell the British or the U.S., you go stop this flotilla, because we've got our hands full killing Palestinians in Gaza.
Wow. Well, if that were to happen, would you pull rank?
Yeah, hell yeah. I'll get right up there in the bow of the ship. I'm an Army colonel, and you guys get away from us. And then I'm going to duck when the bullets start flying at me. No, we'll be broadcasting from the ships. We will be trying to enlist the aid of countries that are not going along with this genocide, and like South Africa filing the case in the International Court of Justice, and the many countries that have voted for ceasefires in Gaza at the UN Security Council. There are a lot of countries that I think are just they are, for whatever reason, they're holding back, and they could break relations with Israel. They could say, we're not going to allow any goods that are produced in our country to go to Israel because they're conducting this genocide. So maybe this idea of this unarmed civilian group of ships that are going because their countries won't go, or our country, the United States, will put all of these military vessels out there and then not even bring in a hospital ship to help those that have been severely wounded. And they're going to take 60 to 90 days to get 5 ships from the east coast of the United States to take these little pontoon bridge docks over to Gaza. It's just the most ludicrous thing. And plus, dropping by parachute into the ocean, all of these, pretty crappy food. I'll just tell you that, because there's still meals ready to eat that the military eats, and it's not good stuff. So, but they're dropping them in the ocean, and then the Palestinians swim out, and many of them have drowned. When the parachute system of the United States is so accurate that they can put a beacon. The normal way that you do it, if you want pallets to land in a certain place, you put a beacon, which is a guided rocket really coming out of the plane. You guide that rocket down to the place that you want the landing zone of all the pallets to go into. And that way the pallets have a device on them that they can kind of hone in on this system. So these things don't have to go in the ocean. They can go into a vacant area on the beach of Gaza. But no, have they spent the money to put this little device that can go down at where you want the stuff to land so people will be away from it, but it won't be in the ocean? No, the U.S. government hasn't done that. And, it just it's so ludicrous what they're trying to do and saying, oh, look, we're airlifting. Well, for God's sakes, what a great ally you have when you can't even get the ally to allow food in, and you're having to airdrop, coordinate with them to have your airplanes not get shot out of the air by your greatest ally, and these planes fly around and then drop this stuff, and it goes into the ocean. It's one of the stupidest things in the world. And when after action reports are done by the U.S. military, they're really good about doing after action reports, but then nobody reads them. But this one is going to be quite an after action report on the successes and failures of the United States. Everything from the political will to, or lack of it, to stop the genocide, to tell the Israelis, we will not give you one more bullet, not one more bomb. This has got to stop, and to break relations with them. But of course, between the AIPAC money that flows into the Congress and into the executive department, every one of the presidents we've ever had elected has taken money from AIPAC so that they will be beholding to Israel when they get elected. So we know for sure that trying to get, we've seen it in spades where the Biden administration, just Biden for the first time uttered the word ceasefire after 7 internationals, not 33,000 Palestinians were killed. So it's a pitiful, pitiful chapter in the history of the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've talked about on the show before, the ceasefire is really like the least. At this point, it's not enough. You need an absolute, you need liberation of Palestine, basically. So, and I'm curious, you said the press release says you're leaving in mid-April, and you mentioned from Turkey. About when do you think that you will get to that barrier? You mentioned roughly 100 nautical miles. When do you think you'll reach that?
Well, we're not giving out real specifics, as you can imagine, trying to have security on this thing, and with the Israelis all over us. We've had ships that have been sabotaged before. The Israeli government has paid off countries not to let us sail from their countries. Like Greece and Cyprus will not let us go from their countries. We had 10 ships in 2011 that were leaving from Greece until the Greek government got a big payoff from Israel, and they refused to let our boats go, coming up with all sorts of crazy, oh, your boat's it doesn't have this on it, it doesn't have that on it. So finally in 2011, we got so fed up with it that we got all of our passengers, I think we had like 55 U.S. citizens on the U.S. boat to Gaza, which we named the Audacity of Hope, because Barack Obama was the president. So we said the audacity of hope of trying to bring aid and hope to the people of Gaza that were getting the crap beat out of them again. So the Greek commandos got their boats, and we took off. And the Greeks, just like the Israelis had people that were watching our boats all the time. So they notified the Greek Navy, and about 4 miles outside of Piraeus, in the main port of Athens, here came this Navy boat with commandos on it and pulled right in front of our ship, forcing it to stop. And the commandos with their weapons pointed at us. You have to stop. You have to return to the dock. You're under arrest. And so we got out our bullhorns and started talking to them. We have every right to leave this port. You can't stop us. Da 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 da. Well, to the credit of the captain of that boat, he listened. He did not have the commando shoot. They did not board the boat. We sat there in a bit of a standoff for, it was a good 2.5, 3 hours. And every person on our boat got on the bullhorn and told him who they were, why they were on the boat, why it was important for our boat to go to Gaza. So we have a recording of all of that. And, we put it up on what social media we had back in those days. In 2011, it wasn't like it is now where you can just instantly let the world know what's going on. But we did have a New York Times reporter on board. We had Democracy Now! On board. So we ended up getting, after this happened, a pretty good record of it. Bottom line was, at the end of 2.5 hours, the captain of the Greek boat, who I think was a little bit sympathetic with us, said, has everyone had a chance to speak? I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. And now I must speak to your captain. Captain, we need for you, this is a direct order. You must return your boat to so-and-so pier. We'll have one boat that goes in front of you and one in behind you, so that you'll know which dock you're supposed to dock in. So at that point, we as organizers, when faced with weapons, we did not want to have anybody injured. And so we agreed with the captain, because he was the captain of the boat and he's the one that makes the ultimate decision. He said it is time for us to turn around and go to where they are telling us, which we did. And then once we got there, we took out all of our banners, our signs, so everybody in the port knew what had happened. The captain actually got arrested for 2 days and was in jail. John was a very good captain. He took it with great grace, but those are the things that happened. That the 10 boats were stopped by Greece. So there are a few ports that we can actually sail from because of the extreme leverage that Israel puts on other countries with paying off national debts. I mean, they can come up with a lot of money to pay to Cyprus and to pay to Greece. And this was back during the big financial crisis in 2011. So the Greeks were trying to get money from anyone. So that's a little history of what we've been dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up the history, because it also just once again proves that nothing started on October 7th. And I'm curious, with the flotillas that have happened in the past, have any of them made it past the Israeli blockade?
Well, the very first boats, and this all started back in 2008 when a group called the Free Gaza Movement got several small little boats in Greece and filled them with like 25, 30 folks from, pretty well all over the world, and set sail to Gaza, never really thinking they would actually make it. And for some reason, they did. The Israeli Navy did not stop them, and they ended up making 5 trips into Gaza, the first time in 40 years that international boats had gone into Gaza City. But then at the end of 2008, the Israelis started what was called Operation Cast Lead, which was a 27-day attack on Gaza that left 1,400 Palestinians dead. And as that military operation started, then they did not allow any more boats in. In fact, they rammed several boats, one of them almost sinking, and had to limp into Lebanon. And that had a CNN reporter on it, and also Nobel Peace Laureate Marie McGuire and former U.S. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. So there's a big record of that one. But since 2008, the Israeli Navy has forcefully stopped every flotilla and boat that has tried to break the blockade.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, the operation that you mentioned is very, very small compared to what's going on now. Their Operation Genocide. So it is clearly a dangerous mission that you all embark upon, and of course, we wish you all the luck and hope that we can hear back from you safely once you've successfully completed it. And where can folks follow this mission as it happens?
Well, there are two websites. One that we have is our national U.S. campaign called U.S. Boats to Gaza. .org, and then the overall international website is freedomflotilla.org.
All right. Well, Anne, thank you again. And now I leave you to do another mission, which is going into Congress and screaming at the faces of those perpetuating genocide. So, best of luck with that too. And thank you
Well,
for coming on the show.
thank you very much, Eleanor, and keep Palestine and Gaza in everybody's hearts and minds. Thank you.
Absolutely. And in our actions as well. Thank you, Anne.
Indeed. Thanks.